Longhorn Nation, how much improvement should we expect from the deep passing game in 2023?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we're talking the Texas football team and the deep passing game. How much improvement should we expect in 2023? Then we're talking about the Texas basketball team and Rodney Terry. Has he found the next Sir'Jabari Rice at the 40 acres? And last but not least, the Texas baseball team has to play 5 games in 5 days due to inclement weather last night. How will they fare in those 5 games? We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's talk about the Texas football team and the deep passing game. And Steve Sarkisian has had multiple instances of media availability since spring ball started. And one of the common themes in that media availability, really, a common theme since he's been at the 40 acres as head coach, is we need to see improvement in the deep passing game, right? He said as recently as last week, maybe even this week, that the deep passing game opens up everything in this offense. The short to intermediate passing game and the running game are all opened up by the deep passing game or the execution of it. And we've seen, as fans of the program the last 2 years, we have not seen a ton of execution in the deep passing game. You can make an argument that the deep passing game was better under Casey Thompson and Hudson Card in 2021 than it was last year. And that might explain why we've seen good offenses the last 2 years at Texas, good in terms of the national ranking. I think it's been top 35 the last 2 years, top 40 for sure the last 2 years, but it hasn't been great to elite. And we've had great to elite level talent on that side of the ball, starting with Bijan Robinson. And then when you bring in Steve Sarkisian as an offensive mind and orchestrator, I think you expect great to elite on that side of the ball. So if Texas wants to reach that level, right, to have a great or elite offense, they need to improve in the deep passing game. And we know that Sark, as a play caller, is going to continue to lean on his bread and butter, which is attacking defenses down the field and then the power run game. And none of that came to fruition any better than in 2020 with that Alabama offense, where they averaged 45 points a game, went undefeated, won the national championship. And you had 3 players in the top 5 in Heisman vote, right? Mac Jones, Devontae Smith at wide receiver, who won it, and then Najee Harris. So for Texas to have a great or elite offense, the deep passing game is going to have to improve. And for that to improve, I think 3 people need to be better in 2023 than they were in 2022. And the first one is Steve Sarkisian. And I thought as an offensive mind and orchestrator, he was inconsistent last year, especially as a play caller. And I thought there were times where he showed flashes of brilliance as a play caller, but there were also times where there was some inconsistency. There were some decisions that had me scratching my head, right? So when we look at the Alabama game, I thought that first quarter was flawless in terms of play calling. Quinn Ewers threw 12 passes for 134 yards. They were attacking the Alabama defense in all areas of the field, really keeping them off balance. But then he gets hurt, and Hudson Card comes in, who has more experience in Steve Sarkisian's offense and just period than Quinn Ewers. And he gets super conservative, lets Quinn Ewers off the leash, but does not let Hudson Card off the leash. And you end up losing that game by 1 point. So that was something that definitely made me scratch my head. I thought in the Oklahoma game, the play calling was really good, right? That's why you beat them 49-0. I thought in the Iowa State game, that last drive where they ran the ball 9 out of 11 plays, the 2 passes were a screen to Bijan on 4th down and then the whip route to Xavier Worthy to win the game. I thought that was really good play calling. Even though you had to take the ball out of Quinn Ewers' hands to run the ball 22 straight times against Baylor, I thought that was really good play calling, right? Which was the reason that you won that game. But you can also say the TCU game, the Oklahoma State game, maybe some other games, there was inconsistency in terms of Sark's play calling, right? And on top of the inconsistency, I think Sark also needs to show more discernment in his play calling, because he said that even, in the Oklahoma State game is a perfect example, even when it wasn't hitting on all cylinders, the deep passing game, he continued to call it because he knows how important it is for the offense. But if it's not working, it's not working, right? And we saw obviously last year, whether it was Xavier Worthy's broken hand, Quinn Ewers' youth and inexperience or just a lack of chemistry between them, the deep ball was not working. So Steve Sarkisian is going to have to find a way to make this offense move the ball down the field, whether they're hitting the deep ball or not. But obviously, you want to hit the deep ball. So I think if he's more consistent as a play caller and shows more discernment in terms of when to call those deep passes, I think they'll be there when he does call them. Two, I think one thing he needs to improve on is play sequencing. And this is something that my brother, Texas Homer, y'all all know how smart he is, really put me on to and kind of alerted me to, is that Steve Sarkisian made some really good play calls last year. But how many times was he making those play calls in sequence of each other? How many times did his play calls make sense in sequence of each other, right? Was he working off of his play calls? Did this play call make sense because the second play call worked off of it, right? Was he calling plays because he was going to counter off that play call later in the game? We didn't see a lot of that. It just kind of felt like Steve Sarkisian was calling his favorite plays, whether he was executing them or not. I think he needs to be better as a play caller and play sequencer this year to keep defenses off balance. And then speaking of keeping defenses off balance, coming into the University of Texas as the head coach, that was supposed to be Sark's superpower, right? We saw that at Alabama, his ability to create mismatches for the offensive side of the ball and then create confusion and coverage bust in the secondary on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't think we saw that a ton last year. If Steve Sarkisian, as the brains of this offense, can create mismatches for us and create coverage bust for them, right, on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to see a lot more deep passing opportunities, and we should be able to execute those. So I think for the deep passing game to improve in 2023, it starts with Steve Sarkisian being better as a play caller, being better as a play sequencer, and showcasing his superpower and creating mismatches for us and creating confusion for them. And then I want to talk about Xavier Worthy. He's the second player or person I think that needs to be better in 2023 to improve the deep passing game. And one thing that Steve Sarkisian mentioned is that he wants to have 4 to 5 players that can attack the defense down the field. And I don't think you had that last year. Coming into the season, you may have thought you had it on paper, but throughout the season, you found out you didn't have it. And that was for a lot of reasons, right? Isaiah Nayor's injury, Ajay Hall just not really making it on field how we thought he would. For some reason, they lacked confidence in Brennan Thompson to put him on the field, even though we know he has track speed. Really, it turned into having all that talent, but still really only having Xavier Worthy being that legitimate deep threat that you could go to consistently down the field. And we saw he just had a down year last year and he had a broken hand. So even he wasn't able to bring that proficiency, attacking defenses down the field like we saw in 2021. And you can make the argument that if Xavier Worthy catches 2 more deep balls last year, this is a 10-win team instead of an 8-win team. I'm not going to make that argument, but you can make it, right? I'm getting old, so forgive me if I have this a little wrong, but I remember in the Alabama game, he dropped the touchdown in the first quarter against Alabama. And then they either get 0 points or 3 points on that drive. I know they got 3 points on the drive where he caught the 45-yarder, but I can't remember if that was the same drive where he dropped the touchdown or that was the drive after. But either way, that's at least a 4-point swing, right? You either go from 7 points to 3 points or you go from 7 points to 0 points. I didn't take anything past Algebra 2 in high school or college, but a 7 to 4 point swing in a 1 point game might have had a different result if Xavier Worthy catches that ball. I talked about Steve Sarkisian superpower, right? Being able to create confusion and coverage bust in the secondary. I remember a play specifically in the national championship game in 2020 where Devontae Smith was one-on-one with a linebacker in the natty, right? It just ran down the field, caught it, and scored a touchdown. We didn't see that a lot last year, but we saw one play in particular in the Alamo Bowl against Washington where Xavier Worthy was lined up in the slot. I can't remember who he was on. He wasn't on a linebacker, but he might as well have been because he ran straight down the field, wide open, split. I think they had 2 high safeties. He splits it down the field. He's wide open, and he drops the ball, right? That's a 7-point swing. I think that game was 28-21. I think they lost that game by 7 points. So, like I said, you can make the argument that if he just catches those 2 passes, this is a 10-win football team last year. Not to mention the deep ball against Oklahoma State, where some people said Quinn Ewers underthrew it, or some people said Xavier Worthy tripped, right, and fell in the end zone. But if he catches that, like once again, you're talking about an 8-win team possibly being a 10-win team last year. And although you've improved the wide receiver room on paper, I got to knock on wood. I got to wait to see, you know what I'm saying, barring any injury, because we were talking all this talk last year and it didn't happen in terms of the wide receiver room. Even though you have players in Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, Thompson coming back, Niblett, A.D. Mitchell, and Isaiah Nayor, who can all attack defenses down the field. I think Xavier Worthy is still the one that keeps defenses and defensive coordinators up at night, right? I think he's still the alpha of this offense, and he's still the one that if you don't keep your eyes on him or you let him go for just a second, he's going to hit his head on the goalpost. And so I expect him to improve on his 2021 season, not just his 2022 season. I think he's going to be a lot better this year. I think he's going to have his first 1,000-yard season at the 40 acres, and I think we're going to see a lot of improvement in the deep passing game. One, because Xavier Worthy won't have two broken hands or a broken hand, knock on wood. And he's just going to be better attacking defenses down the field and have a bounce back year from the stranger that we saw in Xavier Worthy last year. And then last but not least, it has to be Quinn Ewers, right? And, you know, you could say it was the youth. You can say it was the inexperience. You could say, as Steve Sarkisian has said, that he basically was a true freshman. And we know that Steve Sarkisian has said on multiple occasions that he does not like to start first-year quarterbacks in his offense because there's so many complexities to it, so many things to learn, so many things that you pick up with experience and reps that you can't play to your full capability in the first year, regardless of how talented you are. And we knew that Quinn Ewers was one of the highest-graded quarterbacks of all time. So that would speak true if even he couldn't come in and step in right away with all the talent around him, with a Bijan Robinson and a Roshan Johnson behind him, and have this offense hit on all cylinders. But also, Quinn Ewers just has to be better, not in terms of experience, but he just has to be better. And last year, he completed only 58% of his passes. I think that's going to have to be 64, 65% this year for us to get the most out of Quinn Ewers. And in terms of the deep ball, you know, he's going to have to show better chemistry and cohesion with his wide receivers, because that's what it comes down to, right? Timing and reps. And we've seen, they've talked about since the Alamo Bowl practices, he just come in with a different urgency, right? He understood that he had a really bad year last year, and a lot of it can be put on Quinn Ewers' shoulders. And everybody around him is saying he's vowing to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So I expect Quinn Ewers to be a lot better this year. I think he's going to be a lot better tangibly and intangibly, right? Just growth, development, leadership, but also on the field, right? Making the right reads, going through his progressions, knowing when to throw the deep ball, and having better timing with Xavier Worthy and all of his receivers should lead to better execution in terms of the deep ball. So I think that for Texas to be a great to elite offense instead of the good offense we've seen the last 2 years, they're going to have to show a lot more improvement and execution in the deep passing game. And the three biggest people that need to show more improvement in that regard than they did last year is Steve Sarkisian as an offensive mind and orchestrator, Quinn Ewers, who's going to be throwing those deep balls, and Xavier Worthy, who's going to be catching the majority of them. A quick word from FanDuel, and then we're going to talk about Rodney Terry out on the recruited trail. Has he found the next Sir'Jabari Rice for the 40 acres? The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and threes made. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I think Rodney Terry is under some pressure this year. I don't think he's on the hot seat. I don't think that his job is on the line this year, but I obviously think he's under pressure. He earned the right to be the head men's coach of the Texas basketball team, and he was rewarded with that, right? After taking this team to a Big 12 tournament championship and the Elite Eight, he got the job, right? And there were some people that questioned, well, was this Chris Beard's team, right? Chris Beard built this roster. We've seen in previous instances where Rodney Terry was the captain of the ship, he won 53% of his games, right? At Fresno State and UTEP. That's not going to cut it at the University of Texas. So when Rodney Terry is in charge of this program, can he lead it to the same success that he did with Chris Beard's, I'm putting this in air quotes, right? Chris Beard's roster and Chris Beard's team, even though the entire staff had a part in putting this team together. And although I think that Rodney Terry deserved the job, and I think he'll do a good job, those are fair questions, right? Like I said, Rodney Terry, as the captain of the ship, has won 53% of his games, right? So now that he has to build the roster, right, or be the captain of building the roster, putting a product on the floor and coaching them night in and night out, what will this Texas basketball team look like? So that's why I think he's under a great deal of pressure. And he can't prove anything yet, right? Because the season hasn't started. But I think since he did his press conference and got the job, what was that, like 2 weeks ago? I mean, we've seen Rodney Terry has put in the work, right? On the recruiting trail. He's been everywhere. We've seen him at his press conference in Austin. I saw him back in Austin for a donor event with Vic Schaefer and Steve Sarkisian, maybe all the Texas head coaches. I only saw them 3 specifically. We saw him in the DFW area, right? He did an in-house visit with Ron Holland, to make sure everything was good with that commitment, even though he reaffirmed it at the McDonald's All-American game. We saw him stay in the DFW area, and he had in-home visit, or I think he went to the school with the number 1 player in the 2024 class, right? A point guard out of Lake Highlands. He went to SoCal, and he did an in-house visit with AJ Johnson, right? Our 6'5", 5-star combo guard. And then he did an in-home visit with the potential new Sir-Jabari Rice at the 40 acres, and that is Reese Dixon Waters from USC, who has entered the transfer portal. He is a sophomore. Rodney Terry was in home last night with him and his family. And the reason I say he can be the next Sir-Jabari Rice at the 40 acres is because while Sir-Jabari Rice was winning Big 12 Sixth Man of the Year, and he was winning National Sixth Man of the Year, Reese Dixon Waters was winning the Pac-12 Sixth Man of the Year, right? And so he's somebody that's 6'5", 210, a really big guard. And we're bringing in AJ Johnson, who's 6'5", 6'6", at that kind of point guard, shooting guard position, right? But it's been a while since we've seen a guard at the 40 acres with this height and this size in terms of 6'5", 210, somebody that's, tall and physical at that guard position. And based on AJ Johnson's recruitment, which Rodney Terry said he headed, that may be something we'll see more of at the 40 acres in the future. Maybe Rodney Terry likes big guards, targeting Reese Dixon Waters in the transfer portal. So he's 6'5", 210. And he shot 44% from the field, which is really good for a college guard. Averaged 10 points and 3 rebounds off the bench. Now, the three-point shooting was a concern. Last year, he only shot 29.6% from the floor. But 2 things encouraged me outside of him shooting 30% from the three-point line last year. One, he shot 46% the year prior. So the year prior, he averaged like 1.5 attempts per game, and he shot 46% from the three-point line, which is amazing, right? That's elite. Like Steph doesn't even shoot 46% from the three-point line. And then, but that was on 1.5 attempts per game from the three-point line. When he went up to 2.8 attempts from the three-point line, that's when the efficiency went down. 2 is he shot 30% from the three-point line last year and still shot 44% from the field, over 50% on 2. So that tells you that he doesn't have to rely on the three-point line to get his scoring. He can score in the mid-range, and he can score at the bucket if his three-point shot isn't falling. But I expect, we've seen in Rodney Terry's offense that the players can get good three-point shots, especially the guards. So I would expect him to improve on that 30% three-point shooting and be 35+% this year, which would be a really good for the Texas basketball team. And his best game last year, he had 20 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals on 8 of 12 shooting against Long Beach State. So he's somebody that can give you points on the offensive end, averaging 10 points a game off the bench last year. But he's also somebody that can guard multiple positions. I think at 6'5", 210, he's somebody that can guard 1 through 3 at least, and somebody you probably could have used on the defensive end with his size, his strength, and his length against those Miami guards who just kind of bullied us in the paint. So you're looking at somebody who's already thrived in a 6-man role. And I think based on if Tyrese Hunter and Arterio Morris come back at the guard positions, you either have somebody in Reese Dixon Waters who's used to playing in that 6-man role, and I think you can get more out of him in that role at the University of Texas. And obviously you have the best selling point in the country based on what Sir-Jabari Rice just did. You can tell Reese Dixon Waters he can come in and be in that Sir-Jabari Rice role. Or if you lose Tyrese Hunter, Arterio Morris, one of the other or both, then you have somebody who has a proven track record off the bench in college basketball. And I think somebody that's only going to improve if you put him in the starting lineup. So really good size, really good height, somebody that's a capable three-point shooter, a capable scorer on offense, and somebody that can guard 3 positions. I think this would be a really good pickup for Texas in the transfer portal. And like I said, he's somebody that can come in and fill that Sir-Jabari Rice role right away because he just did it last year at USC. Rodney Terry has been on the recruiting trail, and I hope he's able to close this one because I think Reese Dixon Waters will be really good in the burnt orange and white in the Moody Center next year. And then let's close with the Texas baseball team. They are coming off of a win against Air Force. They beat them 7-1 after losing their first games in over a month, right? They had the 16-game win streak and then lost 2 games against Oklahoma State. They picked up a win against Air Force to get back on track, and now they are back into Big 12 conference play. And they were supposed to start a weekend series last night against Kansas State, but, there was some inclement weather, and they ended up pushing the game back to today, or starting the series today. But that caused a problem for the Longhorns because now they have to play 5 games in 5 straight days, right? And if you're like a Major League Baseball fan like I am, they end up playing 8, 9, 10 sometimes games in a row. But you're not used to that in college. So now they're going to have to play 5 straight games, right? I don't think it'll affect them too much, but, if they don't have great outings from their starting pitching and they have to go to the bullpen a lot, that could affect you in that 3rd, 4th, and 5th game, right? When you've already went to your bullpen a lot, and you played 5 straight games, there's not really any room for rest, right? So we're going to need really good outings from our starting pitching, but they're baseball players. I think they'll be all right. And so they have 3 games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against Kansas State. And then Monday and Tuesday, they will be playing one of my alma maters in Texas State. What do I expect from them over the next 5 games? I expect the starting pitching to be good, but it has been inconsistent at times this year. So there may be 1 to 2 starts where you have to go to the bullpen a little bit earlier than you should. But I expect the starting pitching to be really good. We saw in the Air Force game, the bullpen was lights out, 5 innings to close the game, not allowing a hit. I think as long as the bullpen can stay rested, they'll be really good in these 2 series against Kansas State and Texas State. I was about to say Iowa State for some reason. Texas State, one of my alma maters. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we've seen since they came off that loss to Cal State Fullerton when they lost that series and they were 4-7, the offense has been better. And they've shown to score in a variety of ways, right? By savvy base running, hitting home runs, or passing the baton, right? With really good at-bats, singles, doubles, triples, and walks, right? So I would expect that to continue against Kansas State and then Texas State. And then last but not least, you're going to have to be really good on the defensive end, right? When the ball is put in play, can you make the right defensive play, turn double plays, and limit errors to make sure that you can win both of these series? So I expect them to win both of these series. I'm not going to say they're going to win all 5 games. I think they go 4-1. I think they go 2-1 against Kansas State. And then I think they win both games against Texas State to go 4-1 in this stretch. And that would make them, 25-10 on the season after these 5 games. So I'm expecting the Texas baseball team to go 4-1 against Kansas State and Texas State to get to 25-10 on the season. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em and peace. Reese Dixon Waters, I need to see you in the burnt orange and white next year playing in the Moody Center. Peace.